It was late autumn, 1879. The nights had grown hard and sharp. The ground around the small Wyoming settlement of Silver Creek swept bare by cold winds. Anyone without a roof over their head in this season had two choices: find shelter or die trying. At the edge of the forest, a few miles off the trade road, stood a forgotten cabin. The planks were gray and split, the roof caved in at the corners, and the door hung crooked in its frame. But it was shelter, more than the open plains could ever offer. Anna approached slowly, her hands buried deep in her coat. She'd been walking for days. Her feet were blistered, her body hollow with hunger, and her heart weighed down by memories she didn't dare revisit. She had run north, away from men who treated her as property, away from the life that had strangled her breath one small humiliation at a time. Once she had believed in a simple life. Her parents had run a small bakery in Laramie, and she had dreamed of a home, a garden, and the steady rhythm of ordinary days. But after her parents' deaths, everything crumbled. The men who claimed to look after her took more than care. They took control. When one of them decided she'd make a fine wife and refused to take no for an answer, she ran. Now she stood in front of the cabin, too exhausted to think of anything except warmth. The hinges groaned as she pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled of ash and rot. The walls leaned, the hearth was cold, and the place reeked of long neglect. But there was a small pile of firewood near the corner, and that was enough. She found a few scraps of tinder fungus in her pocket, struck flint with trembling hands, and waited until the spark caught. When the fire finally flared, the relief nearly brought her to tears. The glow fell across her face, hollow cheeks, cracked lips, eyes too old for her years, but behind the exhaustion was something that hadn't yet died: resolve. She drew her knees close to her chest, staring into the flames. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Every sound made her heart race. She knew they would come after her. Men from Laramie didn't like being denied what they thought they owned. Her mind circled the same questions. How long could she survive here? What would she eat? Could she make it through winter alone? But as the fire warmed her skin, she made herself a promise. She would not go back. Whatever happened, she would not go back. That night, she slept sitting up, knife in hand, the fire still burning low. Morning came pale and brittle. The ashes in the hearth glowed faintly, and her breath hung in the cold air. She went out to fetch water from the creek, moving carefully over the frozen ground. Her muscles ached, but the air was clean and quiet. For a brief moment, she felt something close to peace. When she returned, something was wrong. The cabin door stood open. Anna froze. She set down the jug, gripped the small knife in her pocket, and pushed the door with her shoulder. Inside, a man stood near the fire. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a heavy coat that carried dust and snow. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. His hands were rough, his movements deliberate. "I just need some warmth," he said, his voice low and calm. Anna's grip tightened on the knife. "This cabin's mine," she lied. He didn't argue. He took off his gloves, crouched by the fire, and rubbed his hands together. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind outside. "I won't stay long," he said finally. "There's a storm coming, just for the night." Anna didn't lower the knife, but something in his voice, steady, neither pleading nor commanding, made her ease back a step. She sat opposite him, never looking away. In the flicker of firelight, she saw the exhaustion in his face. He looked like a man who'd slept too many nights on frozen ground. "What's your name?" she asked after a long while. "Jakob," he said. Nothing more, she nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. They shared silence until it no longer felt dangerous. When she offered him her water jug, he accepted it with a brief nod, drank, and handed it back. It was a small thing, but in that exchange something shifted. For one night, they were simply two people trying not to freeze. The next morning, Jakob didn't leave. Anna woke to the sound of hammering. He was outside, fitting planks against the door, reinforcing the loose boards with pieces of wood scavenged from the fallen fence. She stepped out, her breath rising in small clouds. "Why are you helping?" she asked. He didn't look up. If the door holds, we both stay warm. The simplicity of the answer cut deeper than any gesture of kindness could have. For so long, no one had said we to her. That day passed quietly. Anna fetched water, tended the fire, and tried not to watch him too closely. Jakob was a man of few words, but he moved with purpose. When she offered him half her bread, he took it without comment, only giving her a brief, measuring look before eating. She sensed no threat in him, just a quiet resolve that mirrored her own. As the light faded, they sat by the fire again. Neither spoke much. The silence between them had changed. It was no longer a wall, but a shelter. That night, Anna slept deeper than she had in weeks. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Jakob repaired the roof, gathered firewood, and kept his rifle always within reach. Anna cooked, cleaned, rationed what little food they had. Neither spoke about their past. But there was an understanding, something wordless that grew stronger each day. Then one evening, just as the sun slipped behind the ridge, the sound of hooves broke the quiet. Anna froze. Jakob looked up sharply. He took the rifle, checked the chamber, and positioned himself by the door. Men's voices drifted through the cold air. "The trail ends here." A low laugh followed. Anna's stomach turned to stone. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to tell Jakob everything, who they were, what she'd fled from, but her throat locked. Jakob made a small motion with his hand. "Stay quiet." The riders drew closer. The crunch of snow under boots. A shove against the door. The wood shuddered but held. "Empty," one voice muttered. "She's gone." Hoofbeats receded. The wind swallowed the sound. Only when silence returned did Anna sink to the floor, trembling. Jakob set the rifle aside and sat by the fire again, his face unreadable. "They're looking for you," he said finally. It wasn't an accusation. Just a fact. Anna nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, they want me back. I ran from a man I was supposed to marry. I couldn't stay. I'd rather die in the snow than go back." Jakob didn't speak for a while. The fire cracked softly between them. Then he said, "Then you'll have to stay where they can't find you." She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time. There was no pity in them, only a quiet certainty. For the first time since she'd run, she felt the faint outline of safety. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking of the way he'd stood between her and danger without question. Why? What did he owe her? He sat awake by the fire, the rifle beside him, eyes fixed on the flames. His calm unnerved her. It was the calm of someone who had seen violence before and didn't fear it anymore. As the wind howled outside, Anna moved closer to the fire, shivering. Jakob noticed but said nothing. He shifted a log into the embers so the flames flared brighter. It was a simple, wordless kindness, and it broke something open inside her. All the months of fear, loneliness, and hunger pressed behind her ribs until they gave way to something fragile but alive. She sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. Hesitant, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't pull away. The quiet acceptance in that stillness said more than words could. After a long moment, she whispered, "Don't leave." Jakob turned his head slightly, eyes soft in the firelight. He nodded once. No promises, no speeches. Just that small motion that carried all the weight she needed. For the first time in years, Anna slept without fear. Morning came clear and sharp. Jakob was awake, the rifle still near his hand. When Anna stirred, he only said, "Storm's easing." But peace didn't last. By midday, the sound of hooves returned, this time louder, closer. Anna felt the blood drain from her face. Jakob stood, checked the rifle again, and looked through the narrow slit of the window. "3 of them," he said. His tone was calm, almost detached. "They've come back." Voices shouted from outside. "We know you're in there, Anna. Come out and no one gets hurt." The words cut through her chest. She trembled, her hands cold. Jakob moved to the door, his expression unreadable. "Stay behind me," he said. She wanted to protest, to tell him it wasn't his fight, but the words stuck. "Why?" she managed. He turned slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. "Because I've decided." Then the pounding began. The door shook under heavy blows. One of the men shouted that they'd set the place on fire if she didn't come out. Jakob pulled back the hammer on his rifle. The sound was crisp, final. "Leave," he called. "The woman stays." There was a pause outside. Muffled cursing, the nervous shuffle of horses. Then, slowly, the voices faded. The hooves retreated again, swallowed by snow and distance. When the silence returned, Anna's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, her breath shaking. Jakob set the rifle aside and sat by the fire as if nothing had happened. She stared at him for a long time. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "I know." "Then why?" He looked into the flames. "Because I know what it's like when no one stays." For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire snapped softly between them. She realized then that his silence wasn't coldness. It was restraint, protection. He only spoke when words mattered. Later, she told him everything. About her parents, the arranged marriage, the years of submission that had stripped her of her will. Jakob listened quietly, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he only said, "Then you did the right thing." It was enough. By the time the snow began to melt, they had made a plan. The cabin had kept them alive, but it wasn't a future. They packed what they had, Jacob saddled his horse, and together they made their way to Silver Creek. The townsfolk were wary, two strangers with little to their name, but no one asked questions. Jakob sold the horse for tools and seed, and they began to work a small patch of land near the tree line. The days were long, hard and cold, but they belonged to them. Anna dug, planted, and learned the rhythm of the soil. Jakob built fences, split wood, and repaired what needed fixing. They spoke little, but every gesture, every shared silence, said enough. When the first shoots of green broke through the thawed ground, Anna laughed, an open, unguarded laugh she hadn't known she still had. Jakob stood beside her, hands on his hips, watching her with a faint smile. That night, they lit a new fire, not one of survival, but of beginning. Anna looked at him across the flames. "You stayed," she said quietly. Jakob nodded, the same simple nod as before, but this time she understood it completely. Outside, spring crept slowly over the valley. The men from Laramie never came back. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe they'd met their own ends on the road. It didn't matter. For the first time, Anna's life wasn't about running. It was about staying. The cabin had been a place of fear once, a stop between desperation and death. But in the end, it became something else entirely, a place where two lost people stopped wandering, where silence became trust and survival turned into something more enduring. Jakob no longer needed to run from his past. Anna no longer had to hide from hers. And as the wind softened through the pines and the first wildflowers broke through the snow, Silver Creek whispered its quiet approval. They had both finally come home.